Welcome back. We are moving on to part 2 of chapter 2 of Applied Behavior Analysis, the 3rd edition. We're starting on page 27 and we're going to start talking about environment. This is another one of those key terms in the Cooper textbook for this chapter. So the environment, this word, you're going to use this for the rest of your life. You're an ABA. What does the behavior look like in their immediate environment? The environment at home, the environment in clinic, the environment at school or at work. Basically, an environment is anything that the organism, the patient or the client that you're working with is engaging with and in that moment in space and time when you are observing and taking data. So think back of when you were in middle school or in high school and you would have to go from one class to the next. So you are in school, which is one environment, but the environment is still changing as you transition from one classroom to the next. Your environment changes from, for example, your chemistry class. There's a whole set of stimuli in that room. You have a teacher in that room, peers in that room. You go in the hallway, there's a whole set of new different stimuli. You move into your math class, again, different stimuli that you will come into contact with. So the environment is always changing, and just because you are in one place, it does not mean that it will be stable or the same environment. So in ABA, we are talking about how our behavior or the behavior of the organism changes depending on what is happening in its immediate environment. So I kind of jumped the gun there. The next key word is stimulus. And Cooper defines this as an energy change that affects an organism through its receptor cells. So earlier in my example of traveling, in the hallways and from class to class in middle school, in high school, or even in college, every time that your eyes see something different, they are seeing a different set of stimuli, right? So if I close my eye, there's black, I can't see anything. If I open my eyes, I see what's in front of me, right? So the same thing when you're walking down the hall, as you're walking, there's a whole bunch of different stimuli that's coming at you. Maybe you can smell somebody's BO, maybe you can smell somebody's cologne, maybe it's hotter in the hallway. So all of those things will go ahead and have some sort of response from our senses. So our 5 senses would make up the exteroceptors. So again, exto, think outside. So things that we would be able to see and measure with our senses. So for example, I can feel this. If somebody goes like this, I can feel the breeze. It's not that somebody's actually physically touching me, right? But they're making wind with their hand or a fan or another object. And I would also feel that with my exteroceptors. Then we have our interoceptors, which are related to the viscera. So it's like your headaches, your stomach aches, nausea, right? And then the proprioceptors, which would be the ones where if you feel dizzy or off balance. So when you're riding a roller coaster and it goes whoop, and that little like dip in your stomach. Or when you stand up too quickly and you get dizzy. So those would be the other kind of receptors, but those would be internal, in other words, within the organism's skin, and they would still help us understand or signal to the brain that there has been some kind of change in our immediate environment. So how do we discriminate between the different types of stimuli in ABA in regards to the behavior that we are observing or trying to increase or decrease? Stimuli is usually categorized into 3 different types of stimulus. So the first one would be the physical properties or attributes such as color, shape, size. And then we have the location of the stimulus in regards to the behavior. So think 3-term contingency, the antecedent and the consequence. So Antecedent is anything that happens before the behavior, and a consequence is what happens after the behavior. Keep in mind there's also such a thing as socially mediated contingency for antecedent and consequences, and that just means they're presented by a person. So stimulus class is just a set of stimulus that share common properties of these three categories. So did they happen before the behavior? In other words, are they antecedent strategies? Did they have a delayed but long-term effect on the behavior? Are they all red? Are they all square? Right? So it just means that it is a set of stimuli that share one or more properties in one of the three categories as we describe stimulus in ABA. So that is it for part 2 of chapter 2 of applied behavior analysis in more manageable bite-sized pieces. This chapter is probably going to take more parts than I had originally planned. It's just a lot to unpack, and I want to make sure that I break it down for you as much as possible so that it's super easy for you to digest. So next time we will get started on respondent behavior, go over respondent conditioning, respondent extinction, and I'll probably stop right before starting operant behavior. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. See you later.